This is 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson. My guest is Ms. Leela Ramdeen. She's chair of an organization called the Greater Caribbean for Life, an anti-death penalty organization, among other things on the human rights agenda. We're talking, and this is a time when consciousness about the death penalty, its application, its usefulness, its absence of usefulness, come under scrutiny. That's the focus of our discussion in this edition of the program. Good to see you.
Yeah. Good to see you. Thanks for having me.
All right. Let me start by asking you to push back against the idea that people have who say that the death penalty saves lives.
Yes. In fact, as you know, there's been an article in our press recently with someone comparing us to Singapore and saying that the death penalty saved life. Well, that's a myth. The death penalty does not save life. We have to look at some of the statements made by our own senior people in our country about what would save life before we look at whether the death penalty saved life. In fact, the death penalty in our Caribbean region, as we know, over the years, the Privy Council, which is our final court of appeal, has raised the bar so high that we cannot hang anyone. The last person who was hanged was Andrew Briggs in July 1999. And in 2008, there had been a series since the 1994 Pratt and Morgan case where the Privy Council made it clear if you're on death row for more than 5 years, you cannot be executed, you cannot be hanged. Yeah. And since then, there have been a series of cases. One case said 4.5 years is too long. Another case said 3 years is too long. But in 2009, there was a case, the Queen and Trimmingham, I think St. Vincent and the Grenadines case, where the Privy Council laid down 2 key principles that if a country wants to hang, to execute in our region and elsewhere, they must do 2 things. First of all, it must be the worst of the worst crime. And secondly, there must be no opportunity for, well, you can't redeem the person, reform the person. Yeah. And then you must also, there must be no other method of trying to reform the person. Since then, of course, with all these cases, we know that most of the people, we have 1,300 people waiting for the murder cases to be heard. We have 45 people who are lifers, and many of them would have been there more than 5 years. Some years ago, our then Attorney General, Honorable Faris Al-Rawi, had said he's trying to speed up the process so that we meet the 5 years. That's
2017,
not
I think there were 25 people, he said,
That's
that
it.
I'd been trying
and
to follow
so nothing has happened. So the idea that the death penalty will save lives also has to be seen in the wider context of what is happening in our society. You'll remember, you know, of course, Martin Daly, Senior Counsel. As an attorney at law myself, I really value the words of wisdom and nuggets of wisdom from people like Martin Daly. And he rightly said, there is no doubt that prevailing socioeconomic living conditions in Trinidad and Tobago, unremediated, even in times of economic boom, have rendered our society angry and brutal and more inclined to antisocial and criminal ways of life. That is so true. This morning's paper, we read a professor in UE says there are 510,000 squatters. We still operating on 2005 statistics on poverty that said then 16.7% of our people, 210,000 then, were living under the poverty line. And 510,000 are squatters. Never mind those who are working poor. Yeah. There are lots of working poor because of cost of living has risen, the price of food we see going up all the time. So in those conditions, people are angry and brutal. When Father Archbishop Jason Gordon was, he launched the Pride in Gonzales, Project in Gonzales, when he was Father Jason, I worked with him. 2 decades ago. Yes. And one of the young men I met there, really lovely, chatty young man. I asked him, how you became a bandit? He said, Miss, well, when I was in school, I had a hearing impairment, and my teacher put me at the back of the class, and I couldn't hear. So education passed me by. And when a gang member, the leader of a gang, offered me a gun to put on our work, I took the opportunity. So the self-esteem, our president, Her Excellency, Paula May Weeks herself and others have said we need to actually look at our reform our education system. That Mr. Williams, who'd written an article, before I go on to Mr. Williams' article about saving lives, Ramesh Lawrence Maraj, senior counsel as well, he has actually said in the past, one of the reasons why we're losing the battle in crime is that the state apparatus has failed us. And he rightly said we need better detection techniques, machinery to really catch those who have committed crime, better, proper forensics. Could you believe it took 15 years for the results of the DNA in the Sean Luke's case to come to light? 15 years. Where's our forensics? As he said, we are trying to deal with 21st century crime by using 18th century methods. So when you have the police service, so I was in the police service commission for 4 years, from 2003 to 2007. When you have the corruption within the service, the delinquency, the lack of discipline is something I will always remember in terms of individual cases. So we see on our TV yesterday and today the picture of a man being arrested by the police. He's in handcuffs, the baby has been taken away from him, and he's bashed against the vehicle. As somebody's written today, you're breaking the trust of the public when you do things like that.
Even in a case where you know you're being
he must have known he was being videotaped. There's been cases, for instance, some senior policemen have been arrested for their involvement in human trafficking. We know that the paper this week said that an MP has asked for a probe into how is it that in a murder case, ammunition from the regiment was used. And then we have yesterday a soldier arrested with 2 other men for a robbery in Capital Plaza in Port of Spain. So when you have law enforcement agencies losing credibility in the eyes of society, how are we ever going to save lives that way? So this man, Mr. Williams, compared Trinidad and Tobago with Singapore, saying that Singapore has the lowest number of crimes because they hang people. Well, Norway has the lowest number of crimes, and they have abolished the death penalty. But Singapore, he forgot to say why Singapore is different. Singapore is 11th in the Human Development Index, first in the world for global food security. They have high social indicators in education, healthcare, quality of life, personal safety. 90% of their people are homeowners. The infrastructure that exists there is of high quality. They have zero tolerance for corruption. You know, the head of the chair of the Integrity Commission only this week said, if we put back in the treasury the 100 and the amount of money stolen through corruption in our country, we would pay off $123.73 billion debt that we owe, and we'll still have $7 billion left for the nation. So in a country like Singapore, where they have very low corruption because of their zero tolerance, we may say we have zero tolerance for corruption, but corruption is rampant, as the Integrity Commission chair said, at all levels.
Every report that we've produced about it says
yes,
that.
The international, our corruption index, we're failing. So we need to look at they have low unemployment rates, etc. So we cannot compare ourselves to a country like Singapore and say, because they hang, we should hang. So I've already said we can't hang. Yeah? But the challenge we have is, if you look at the kind of school violence, I was a chief inspector of schools in England. I'm an educator. To me, education is the way up from social mobility. Everybody knows that. And yet, the violence in our schools is just going, without anybody coming to the fore to say, okay, this is how we're going to tackle school violence. Just putting more police or more security guard is not the issue. What is the curriculum like in our schools? Is it meeting the needs of our 21st century children? There are a whole range of social conditions that our people are living in that's causing this anger that he talks about, Martin Daly, and brutality. And we're becoming a very brutal society.
How do you encourage people to accept that what we want is revenge and not
restoration, restorative justice? A few years ago, there was a Ministry of Justice, and I was asked to produce a paper on restorative justice, which I did, and now it's turned into transformative justice. There is no rehab. When a person enters prison, we have a revolving doors, in our prisons. When they enter, the Commissioner of Police and his team should have a plan for rehabilitation. Rehabilitation before and even when they come out. That, you remember Daniel Kahn's excellent report on prison reform. All the recommendations. We've had so many reports like that and no proper recommendations. The UNDP in 2012, the United Nations Development Program, they made it clear to us that we have to achieve a better balance between legitimate law enforcement and prevention, with an emphasis on prevention. We should look at youth at risk, look at the education system, etc. Mala Dukaran, when they talk about prevention, Mala Dukaran, the economist, said, and that surprised me when I read it, that 15 cents in the dollar only, we only spend 15 cents in the dollar on prevention. Are we serious?
Yeah, we need to take a break. We need to take a break. We're coming back. Our guest, Leela Ramdeen, the issue at hand. The death penalty, has it passed its relevance? Some people say yes, some people say no. We're coming back to that. Stay with us.
Christmas coming, here is all around. Christmas back in town. Christmas coming, here is all around.
Christmas is coming, and your fingers know it.
Christmas back in town. Christmas back in town. Christmas back in town. Oh yeah, I can feel it. Christmas back in town.
For a finger-licking good Christmas. KFC.
Christmas back in town.
Let the home store turn your house into a home you love. We offer household items, lawn and garden, paint center, hardware, plumbing, lighting and electrical, toys and storage solutions. And just for you this Christmas, come check us out for great gift ideas and all your Christmas decorations. 5 convenient locations: 6th Avenue Barataria, The Falls at Westmall, Pennywise Plaza Shoguanas, C3 Center Branch and the Christmas store C3 San Fernando. Check out our Facebook page for more information and come visit us today. The Home Store. Turn your house into a home you love.
Welcome back to the program. This is 10 questions, the issue, the relevance, the continued relevance, or the outdatedness of the death penalty as a remedy for fighting crime, well, high crime, murder, and the rest of it in Trinidad and Tobago. My guest, Leela Ramdeen, chair of the organization known as the Greater Caribbean for Life. So let's come to the issue. A lot of people say we're in a bind because the death penalty is the only penalty there is for murder and crimes like that, and we should be looking at, we should have been looking at and dealt with it for more than decades now, yes, addressing that as central to the issue.
Well, we know that a bill went to Parliament and it was not passed, trying to look at categorizing murder, because Section 4 makes it clear in our Constitution, in the Offences Against the Person Act, anyone who commits murder shall
Yes.
face that, shall face that. And we know we have a savings clause, and that's the challenge we have in Trinidad and Tobago. In 2018, the then president of the CCJ, the Caribbean Court of Justice, Sir Dennis Byron, actually shut down the mandatory death penalty. There were only 2 countries that had the mandatory death penalty in our region, Trinidad and Tobago and Barbados. And he shut down that, saying laws should not be calcified to reflect colonial times. And in fact, Sir Sridhar Ramphal at a conference held here in Trinidad and Tobago, organized by the Law Association some time ago, he actually said, we have to stop holding on to the tailcoats of our colonial masters. They're the ones, Britain gave us the death penalty, they got rid of the death penalty, and we're holding on to it for dear life. Now, I remember one of our ministers, I can't remember if it's Honorable Faris Al-Rawi, made it clear that if we're going to remove the savings clause, there are many other laws that will be affected because the saving clause, affect those laws as well. So human ingenuity, we could use our human ingenuity to change those laws. That should not be a reason for not changing the law. The mandatory death penalty, for those who don't know, a judge, the judiciary cannot use any mitigating circumstances.
Yeah,
you did it,
they have no prerogative.
They have no prerogative. Now, over the years, as we know now, there are fewer, we're at an all-time low in terms of the number of cases that send people...
Committals.
Yes, committals, people sentenced to death. We have 45 people, I understand. They're not on death row, I think they're called lifers. One of them, in fact, is allowed to come out. We've had him on when I was the chair of Catholic Commission for Social Justice and Greater Caribbean for Life, we've had him on our webinars or seminars to come out and speak. He's remorseful. He does a lot of good. People, there is a divine spark in each of us. I don't want to go down the religious way. But no one is irredeemable. No one. And he talks about his remorse in committing the murder. He actually talks to school children to tell them, stay on the right path. He's a host in the prison radio service. So people can be redeemed. But as well as that, remember that the death penalty is flawed in many ways. There's a death penalty information center in America. They've shown that since 1976 in America, 190 people who were innocent have been exonerated. One of them, Juan Melendez, who went to America from Puerto Rico and was just put in jail for a crime he never committed. After nearly 18 years, he came out. He said when he went home, his mother held him and cried. She said, I was praying that I had my little altar praying that you'd be exonerated, but I was also saving money in case I had to bring your body home.
Yeah, and then there's a sort of a civil rights activist in the United States, I call him that, Brian Stevenson. He wrote a book about that called Just Mercy, going back to some cases in which, when they were reviewed, people who had gotten the death sentence, find that...
we had a webinar recently on for our General Assembly. We had Sabrina Butler Smith, a young black woman who was put on death row, convicted and put on death row for years because her baby died and they blamed her. And her second child also has the same condition. And when you hear how the police lied and what happened in cases like that, 190. So in a flawed system, I remember one of the former International Commission against the death penalty, Federico Mayor, he was the president. He rightly said that rejecting the death penalty relates to the kind of society you wish to build. A society that's just and fair. You're promoting respect for law, adherence to the rule of law, etc. And we know that, for instance, the people, remember when South Africa was actually going to, they were considering in their constitution when they were becoming independent, should we keep the death penalty or not? And Judge Shaskalson in 1975 said, the most effective deterrent is knowledge that the offender will be caught, convicted and punished. And of course, Frank Friel, a former head of organized crime in Homicide Task Force in Philadelphia, said the death penalty does little to prevent crime. Fear of apprehension and the likely prospect of swift and certain punishment provides the largest deterrent to crime. Professor Radlett, Michael Radlett, I met him in London with the Death Penalty Project. He and Tracy Laycock from Boulder, Colorado University did a study in 2009, I think it was, asking 97 top criminologists whether they think that the death penalty is an effective method in terms of dealing with crime. 90% of them said no. And again, all of them talking about swift. Well, we know in Trinidad, detection rate is low. On the 10th of November, there were 523 murders here. 98 people were arrested, were charged. There's a 14% detection rate. Where are we going with that? 14% detection. And then the wheels of justice grind so slowly that I told you so many of 1,300 people waiting. That's not swift justice.
Yeah, I want to go back a little bit to the declaration by the then Attorney General saying that he was going to fast track the cases of those people who had no reliefs left for them, 17 people or 25 people as the case may be. We haven't heard a word from as to what he found, as to why he couldn't go forward on it.
Well, we know why. Although Trinidad and Tobago has withdrawn from the American Court of Human Rights, the state has been allowing people to appeal. So you're not only appealing to the Privy Council, they're appealing to other international organizations. 5 years passed, so you can't. And in fact, remember in that case that I spoke about, Trimmingham and the Queen, they said that a probationary, if you're thinking of hanging someone, a probationary report is not enough. You have to get a psychologist's report and also a clinical psychologist's report. So each time the bar has been raised higher and higher. There is no way that you could do it within 5 years. So,
what do you think is stopping the authorities from whichever we've had changes of government now?
Yes.
We've gotten accustomed to that in the last couple of decades, of addressing the issue in the way that it should be addressed.
Well, once you allow people their human rights to appeal, if the system, if the machinery here will take longer than 5 years, then Pratt & Morgan kicks in. 1994, you can't hang. You have to commute it to whatever term, life or whatever. But life really should, as our Pope Francis says, should never be life. There are people, I remember I went to an event at the maximum security prison, and I was pleaded with by some of the lifers there to take action for the Mercy Committee to sit. That's, the power
and that's another issue in itself. People become lifers and they remain there for
the
rest of their lives.
People have been there for 40 years. And the Mercy Committee that should be meeting every couple of years or whatever. And there is a clear process the Privy Council set out of, but that they themselves should have an opportunity to submit information. The President is the one who would grant after consulting with the Prime Minister and the leader of the opposition. Nothing is happening. So are we just warehousing people? And it's costing the state, remember? They'd given figures some time ago, Daniel Kahn in his report, how much it costs the state to keep people in the prison. So you can't hang them. You won't have the Mercy Committee consider, to freeing them. I remember Archbishop Harris, that's one of the things that we in social justice there, and Archbishop Harris had asked the government to look into, set up the Mercy Committee, let them do what they're supposed to be doing. Maybe that, after hearing that, because the victims have to also have their say, they may never release anybody, but at least follow the procedure. Now, I want to make it clear, in all my work, the victim, solidarity with victims is important. And that's something that people try to say that Greater Caribbean for Life not concerned about the victim. You can stand in solidarity with the victim, but the victims are not getting they're not getting younger while we're waiting, like Sean Luke's mother, for 15 years for a case to be dealt with. So solidarity with victims also means having systems to support victims. We don't have a proper witness protection system here in Trinidad and Tobago.
As we we speak right now, some people, this lady who is somebody
Yes.
supposed to be in the protection and talking with the horrors of that in itself.
Yes, yes, I know a lady came to me begging me, her son wants to come out. When he came out and he was shot because of the conditions under which he had to stay as a witness. So unless we have proper witness protection program as well, that's all part of the wheels of justice.
You think it's an absence of will among the political decision makers from administration to administration?
It has to be priority. If you don't see safety of your citizens as a priority. I was in a meeting recently, I was invited by Selina to speak with the acting commissioner of police, McDonald Jacob, and others about Neighborhood Watch. But Neighborhood Watch on their own, you cannot expect society to be doing the work of, when some Neighborhood Watch, you ring and you say, we all have CCTV cameras, you can see the bandits, come, no car, no police vehicle, they come in the next day. So those are issues as well. Neighborhood Watch can only do so much. We need proper, just and fair law enforcement to be dealing with issues. Yeah. And the politicians really need to take the bull by the horn and understand that unless, as Martin Daly said, we're not in an economic boom, we're in a recession, I'm saying, like many countries in the world. So while we had the economic boom, we did nothing. Now is the time, even with the limited resources we have, to at least look to see what can be done. And there are lots of people with ideas. We have a lot of recommendations. The UNDP gave us a lot of recommendations. What are we doing for our youth at risk? How many children have to run away? When I read the story about that little Alon who drowned when he fell in, obviously, and his 19-year-old mother. If you read yesterday the papers, as the article that says, don't judge her. Twice she ran away from St. Jude's. When you read about her life story, how many people are in those, living in a fishing, where the freezer was in the fishing village. No, we could do better than that. So you're living cheek by jowl with absolute wealth and abject poverty. As he said, that's why our people are angry and brutal, because of their living conditions.
Yeah. What do you think happens every time someone raises this specter of carrying out the death penalty to the people who
yes, all it does is, well, two things it does. It frightens those inside, even though they know they've been there longer than 5 years. But it gives false hope to the citizenry. It gives false hope, and they feel, yeah, that will do it. Not analyzing what has happened around the world. You know, there are 37 states out of 50 states in America that have now abolished the death penalty. 37. So we not people just get false hope that that will do it. Popping necks will do it. Popping necks is the term Archbishop Harris then had used. He said popping a few necks will not help us to reduce crime.
All right. Thank you very much. We're going to have to leave it there. Thank you very much, Leela Ramli. You've been looking at 10 questions. I'm Andy Johnson. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.